guys, so right now it's 2020. Everybody's got a guitar just sitting in the back hibernating. We're all quarantined down right now, so right now is the perfect time to get into learning how to play music. Here's what we're gonna do. Today I've pulled out an old guitar. This is actually my girlfriend's father's, and he was curious what would it take to put it back together. There's actually two of them. I've got an acoustic and I've got a classical. Now I'm going to take both of them and we're going to put them back into playing condition so that they can actually practice during this time. So you're going to need a couple of things. First of all, above all else, you're gonna need a new pack of strings. Other than that, a set of wire cutters. If you can get your hands on this, some kind of fretboard conditioner, which is made by Dunlop. You can maybe try and Amazon it too. And then a guitar polish cleaner. Let's take a look at this guitar. Now, I'm actually kind of stoked about this because it's not often that you actually see a guitar like this. Well, I mean, it's not often you see a guitar like this. It's not often you see a case like this. I mean, this thing is just super cool. It's a little bit falling apart, and I mean, it's seen some wear, but it's really cool. I mean, it's got this kind of like chrome bumper thing going on the side. Let's take a look at what the guitar actually looks like right now. Unlatch. There we go. Okay, so, like I said, I've got two guitars right now that we're going to be working on, and this is the classical. As you can see, one of the strings is broken. This is actually normal. When you store a guitar for a really long period of time, specifically classical guitars, the metal strings have a nylon core in them, and it tends to wear out just through the tension and snap. It's a normal thing. But it looks like, there it is, see? And it snapped right down near the bridge where it normally does. But I mean, you can see that these were well played before it was being put away. I mean, I'm not sure if you can see that, but they're pretty nasty. So let's pull this out and see what we can do to fix it. Normally, when I'm working on a guitar, okay, I'll put it on a table with a small piece of carpet under it and then a couple books and things like that, just to protect it. But because I don't have space for this, I'm just gonna do it on my lap because a lot of you will probably be doing that anyways. First things first, gotta pull the strings off. You've got one of these kicking around the house. This thing here, also got another one without the clipper end on it, but this is a string winder and you can actually use it to unwind the strings. So you don't have to take them off completely, but you do need to loosen them enough. I don't like to just cut the strings while they've got full tension on them. I don't even know if it's bad for the guitar, but it just hurts me inside. Alright, so, strings are loose. Normally you want to take a set of wire cutters to it, but this has actually got string cutters already built into it. So you're just going to take this and you're going to chop off the bottoms. Now you just need to undo all the knots and just get the strings off. So the last person that did this didn't tie the knots correctly, so now it's a pain to get them off. Which, I mean, it might be sort of a good thing. Just not for me. So what I did there was I just tried to get in there with some wire cutters and just cut the knot, just because I wasn't able to untie it. It's too tight. And what I mean when I say too tight, I mean it was too small. Like you can't get your fingers in there. All right, so finally got all the strings off of it, and as you can see, it's actually, funny enough, it's not in the worst of shape that I've ever seen a guitar be in. I mean, it's definitely not perfect, but it's actually pretty darn good. So let's get started on cleaning this. As you can see, there's a lot of just basic dust and things like that. You're gonna want to clean that off with a microfiber cloth, which I forgot to mention we need a microfiber cloth because I forgot to pull mine. Be back in a sec. Alright, microfiber cloths. Why do you want these? Well, because you don't want to scratch the guitar. And generally you want two, okay? You're gonna need one for the fretboard, and then one for the basic guitar. So first thing we're going to start off with is actually just cleaning the fretboard. That being said, if the guitar is just like completely like decrepit and gross, well then yeah, clean the guitar first. So if you take a look at this guitar here, the fretboard I would guess is made out of rosewood, which means that it needs to be moisturized once in a while. I mean, if you take a look right here, I'm not sure if the camera's gonna actually focus on that. There's a crack in the fretboard right there, okay? On more expensive guitars, you would get that kind of a thing fixed. This one, I don't think it's really going to affect the playability, especially since it's at the top. Not to mention this guitar isn't worth a whole lot, so I mean I wouldn't bother trying to get it repaired. So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually moisturize the fretboard using this. It's a fretboard conditioner. So I'm just going to take this and dab it all the way down the fretboard. Looking way better. Okay, so fretboard's pretty clean. Now, I gotta say, the frets are not actually the worst that I've ever seen. I've seen a lot worse. I'll zoom in on these. But they are a little rusty. And generally when you'll see guitars that have been stored for a while, they'll be really bad, like they're really rusty. These are actually not the worst I've ever seen. But what we're going to do is we're still going to clean them up a bit. So, how do we do that? So what you need is super fine steel wool. Okay, I don't know what the grit is exactly off the top of my head. You can buy it at any hardware store. Now, there's a bit of a debate on whether you should just run it up and down the fretboard. If your guitar is excessively dirty and the fretboard's really decrepit, and I mean, the guitar's not worth very much anyways. It's not the biggest deal, but I mean, in theory, you do want to protect your fretboard. So you can either tape up all the spaces between the frets, and then you can just run up and down really easily. Or you can get a fret guard. So you can get them from StewMac, or you can make your own. So, example, I don't have any, but I can make one, and I did. So all I did was take an old business card, and you just chop out a space big enough to fit a fret in, and then it needs to be short enough that you could fit it between the frets on the higher end of the guitar, and this will protect the area between the frets. So what you do then, I'm going to start with the top one here, okay, is put the fret guard over the fret, and you just take the steel wool and you clean off the fret. So you're just going to rub it up and down so it's nice and shiny, nice and clean. And the difference is just absolutely drastic. It looks brand new. So now I'm going to do that for every single one of the frets, all the way up the fretboard. Alright, so the frets look beautiful. Nice and clean. It was already not a very dirty fretboard in the first place, so there wasn't a lot that I had to do for that, but sometimes you'll actually get like a lot of finger crud, like dead skin and stuff that's stuck to the fretboard. Then you just need to take the microfiber cloth with the cleaner and just scrub a little bit harder. You can also like scrape it a little bit with your nail through the microfiber cloth if you really need to, if it's really decrepit. If it's a really nice guitar, you want to be really, really cautious. This one, like I said, is a really... I mean, it's an old guitar, it's not worth a lot of money, so I'm just trying to make it playable and clean it up, you know, make it look as good as it can. So now, cleaning up the actual body of the guitar. So I'm going to change microfiber cloths now. And I've just got some guitar polish. So I'm going to, while it's clean and has no strings on it, I'm going to give it a quick buff. Where'd my cloth go? Ah. There it is. Just to get all the areas that you can't normally get while the strings are on it. guitar is relatively clean. So now, time to put the strings on. For a classical guitar, okay, we need to tie some knots. Unlike steel strings, which I'll show you in a little bit, have these little plugs that you can stick the strings through. Classical guitars, you gotta tie nuts. Nuts. Classical guitars, you have to tie knots. Knots, not nuts, knots. So, we're gonna start with the high E string. Easy way to take these strings apart, because sometimes people just try to undo them. You just kind of like shake them apart really hard in the middle and it comes apart. Here's what you gotta do. You want to run through the string through the back end of the guitar. Now there's a couple different ways of tying these knots, but this is just how I do it. Run it through. Now, lighter. I know, you guys are thinking, he's crazy. He's bringing fire near dry wood. That's real smart. Actually, it is for this. So what you want to do is, if you hold the string over the guitar and you do what I'm about to do, you might drip plastic on it. So you always want to make sure that when you do it, you hold it over the edge so that if there is any kind of weird stuff, it doesn't get on your guitar. You're gonna take the lighter, and you're gonna melt just a tiny little ball onto the end of it. So I'm gonna try and hold this up so you can see it. Just a tiniest little ball. So it's essentially a tiny little ball, like not even a millimeter size. The reason I melt a ball onto the end is because we have to tie knots onto the end. And the treble strings on a classical are slippery. They won't actually hold very well unless you tie a couple of times around. And even then, sometimes they will still slip. If it does slip, what it does, it goes pew. I hit that a little hard, but what it does is it actually makes a dent in the top of your guitar, and it's a dent that's really hard to repair. Like, it's not just surface mark, it'll go right into the wood. I've had that happen to me before, and I've known tons of friends that have too. So with this way of doing things, you take it and you just melt a little ball on the end so it doesn't pull back through. And then now, the knot that you want to tie, you're going to take it, you're going to zoom in on this. Alright, so you're going to take it, you're going to run the string under, and then through. Okay, it creates this little loop. Not sure you guys can see that all that well. But it creates this little loop, and you just want to do that a couple of times. So ideally on this string at least 2 times. So down, around, through. Then what I do is I put my finger on the end of the ball and hold it to the end here, and then I'll pull it through, relying on the fact that the string is slippery to get into the right spot. And ideally you want to try and keep the base of it off the top of the guitar. Now I missed it very slightly, but it should be okay anyways. And now if you take a look at this, come on, focus, there we go. Hey, dum-dum. Really? Can't trust anything on this stabilization. Manual focus. Okay. Alright, so had a little issue with the autofocus there, but see how it's wrapped around twice and then you got a little ball on the end there? If that ever slips, well actually it will never slip, it will get stuck in the knot, so you're never going to have that issue where it's going to go and bang the top of your guitar. So for the top of the guitar, this is not what most people do. I was shown how to do this a few years back, and I've just always done it this way since, and it works great. And I find it easier. So you just take the string, you run through the hole, pull it up through. What you do is you take the string, and you wrap it around itself a whole bunch of times. There you go. And then once this is done, take the guitar, and now we're going to wind it. So, string winders really help for this. Let's see, which way am I going? There we go. Now, it's important to note that while you're doing this, you want to make sure that the string is winding to the outside of the post. So the post is this bit right here. You want to make sure that it winds on the outside of it. You want the strings to be as straight with their slot on the nut as possible. Now, another thing to note is while I do this, I try to keep tension on the string so that it'll wind itself. I don't want any kind of like little loops or pops. Alright, and now I'm not going to wind it up to any kind of real tension right now because it's just going to stretch anyways. Alright, 3 more to go. Okay, so like I was saying before, you want the strings to be lined up with the nut slot. So this is the nut and these are the slots, and you want them to be as straight as possible. This actually helps a lot with tuning stability. Most of the time your guitar is going to go out of tune because the string won't have equal tension on either side and then it slips. So you just got to make sure that the strings end up as straight as possible, and that just means that winding them correctly. So the first one is wound towards the outside and the other two go towards the inside. On the other side it's going to be the same thing but a mirror image. These two are going to be, the top two here are going to be on the inside and this last one's going to be to the outside. The knots are a little different now though. So this is the 4th string. Got it. So pull the sticker off. We're going to take this, okay, in the bottom half. The bottom half is going to have the exact same knot as the top half did. Okay, so you're going to wind it around once. You can try and do it twice if you want, but I mean, on the D string it might work, but the other strings it's going to be a little too tight. And same thing as what I did before. I'm going to try and hold the bass along the edge of the bridge here, and then pull tight until it pulls the whole thing through. There we go. And there we go. That's nice and neat. All right, let's zoom in on that. So, like I was saying, nice and neat. So now you're going to take the string and you're going to run it up through the top. So through the hole. Okay. And what you need to do now is the exact same knot that you did at the bottom. All right. So around the hole, and here's the important part. Okay, if I'm gonna wind this towards the inside, I need to make sure that the little stem is not in the way. So that means I need to wrap it around. So I need to wrap it around. Ugh. Wrap it around. There we go. So that it pokes out. Move this the right way. The opposite side. So I loosened it just so you can see. But the top of the knot is pointed out away from where I'm going to be winding it. So now when I wind it towards the inside, that little pointy bit there is not going to be in my way. So we've got all the strings on it. It's not tuned yet. I'll be doing that. One thing you need to know about specifically classical guitars. Okay, once you put the strings on, it takes a while for them to stabilize. And what I mean by stabilize is your guitar is going to constantly be going out of tune for about a week. Or less. It can be stable in a day, but you need to stretch the strings. So you need to tune it and pull on the string a little bit, and then tune it and pull on the strings. In terms of tuning it, if you've never done it before, I would strongly suggest you guys getting a tuning app, okay? My personal favorite, and I'm not sponsored by these guys, is Guitar Tuna. So tuna like a fish. It works great. The free version's good, and it's just about as easy as it gets. You hit the note and it'll tell you what string you're playing. If you don't know what it's supposed to sound like, let's say you're really off in your tuning, you can push the button next to the note and it'll tell you exactly what the note is supposed to sound like. But yeah, so I'm gonna tune this up, I'm gonna try and get it stable, and we're gonna see how it sounds. So there you go, guys. I mean, like you can see, it's not too hard to get them set up, and I mean, heck, it's the perfect time to learn how to play guitar. If you guys have any questions, drop them in the comments. If you've learned anything from this, it's change your strings, and it'll sound great. I'll see you in the next episode.